On February 1st, 2026, a company called Orient Watch was formally dissolved. 75 years of continuous operation ended with a corporate filing. If you follow watches even casually, you probably know Seiko. You probably know Citizen. But Orient? The name barely registers for most people, and that's strange, because for 7.5 decades, this company did something that almost no watchmaker at any price point can claim. They designed and manufactured every single movement in-house. Not assembled from parts bought off a catalog. Not modified from someone else's blueprint. Built from scratch, in their own factories, by their own engineers. Swiss brands charging $5,000 often can't say that. Orient was doing it in watches that cost $120. They were the third giant of Japanese watchmaking. And somehow, the world just never noticed. To understand how that happened, you have to go back more than 120 years to a district of Tokyo called Ueno. If you've been to Tokyo, you might know Ueno for the park, the museums, and the cherry blossoms that draw thousands of visitors every spring. But in 1901, a man named Shogoro Yoshida opened a small wholesale shop on one of its streets selling imported pocket watches. Nothing glamorous. Yoshida was a merchant, not a watchmaker. He saw that Japanese consumers wanted Western-style timepieces, and he figured out how to get them into the country and sell them at a markup. For the first 12 years, that's all the Yoshida watch shop was. Pocket watches came in from overseas. Yoshida sold them. The operation grew at the pace you'd expect from a single storefront in early 20th century Tokyo. But Yoshida had bigger ambitions than retail. In 1913, he started manufacturing his own watch cases. That sounds like a small step, but it meant investing in precision metalworking equipment, hiring skilled craftsmen, and building quality control processes from nothing. Cases require machining tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter, careful finishing that determines how a watch sits on the wrist, and the kind of consistency that separates a professional operation from a hobbyist workshop. Yoshida wasn't just selling watches anymore. He was learning how to build them. That industrial capability grew quickly. In 1920, Yoshida founded a company called Toyo Tokei Manufacturing, and this new venture started producing table clocks, gauges, and wristwatches. By 1934, wristwatches were the main business. The demand grew fast enough that a modern 4-story factory went up in 1936 in the Hino area of Tokyo. Hundreds of employees, real production lines. Yoshida had gone from selling other people's pocket watches to running a genuine manufacturing operation in about 3 decades. And then the war came and took everything. Japan's civilian industries were gutted to feed the military machine, and Yoshida's factory was no exception. The entire operation was converted to produce aerial weaponry. Every lathe that had been cutting watch components was now machining parts for a completely different purpose. When the war ended in 1945, Japan's economy was in ruins, and Yoshida's old company tried to restart. But the financial damage was too deep. The business collapsed, and it looked like 35 years of work had been permanently erased. That should have been the end. But the people who actually worked in that factory had a different plan. The machinists, the engineers, the technicians who knew how to cut gears and calibrate balance wheels and set jewels into movement plates, they refused to let it all disappear. In 1950, a group of these former employees pooled whatever resources they could find and founded a new company called Tama Keiki. It wasn't some well-funded corporate restart. It was the workers themselves saying, "We know how to build watches, and we're going to keep building watches whether anyone backs us or not." 1 year later, they renamed the company Orient Watch. And the name was deliberate. Orient comes from the Latin word oriri, meaning to rise, like the sun in the east. The employees who created this company from factory floor experience and post-war scrap were declaring that their craft would rise again. One of the smartest things the new company did was bring in Tamotsu Aoki as an advisor. Aoki wasn't a watch industry figure in the traditional sense. He was a professor emeritus at the University of Tokyo and the first chairman of the Horological Institute of Japan, which made him one of the most credentialed horologists in the country. Getting someone with that background to join a scrappy startup founded by factory workers was an extraordinary move. Aoki brought rigorous scientific methodology to Orient's manufacturing. He introduced testing standards, quality benchmarks, and precision measurement techniques that immediately raised the bar for what Orient's watches could achieve. But Aoki was also thinking about something bigger. He wanted Orient on the world stage, competing with the Swiss and the Americans, not just surviving as a small domestic producer. That vision took shape fast. By 1955, Orient had signed a memorandum trade agreement with China and begun exporting watches internationally. This was just 5 years after the company had been founded by a group of former factory workers with almost no capital. 5 years from startup to international exporter. Within a few more years, shipments were reaching Iran, then Canada, the United States, and Brazil. Orient was building a global distribution network at a time when many Japanese companies were still focused entirely on the domestic market. By the end of the 1950s, Orient watches were being sold in dozens of countries, and within another decade, that number would grow to more than 70. The company's first breakout product came in 1957 with the Orient Star Dynamic. It featured a centrally mounted seconds hand, which sounds basic now, but was a meaningful design evolution at the time, and a movement built with a Nivaflex mainspring. Nivaflex was a stronger, more elastic material than what most manufacturers were using, and it improved the watch's performance and longevity. The Orient Star name was chosen deliberately to mean a shining star, and it was meant to represent the absolute peak of what Orient could build. It also introduced a design principle that Orient would follow for decades afterward. Orient Star watches would always carry in-house movements with better finishing and tighter tolerances than the standard Orient line. In 1958, Orient launched the Royal Orient and took aim at the luxury market. This was a water-resistant dress watch with a larger diameter 19-jewel movement, and its finishing and attention to detail put it in direct competition with Swiss pieces that cost multiples of its price. The Royal Orient proved that Orient could build premium timepieces. They weren't just an affordable brand, they could go upmarket when they chose to. But it was the 1960s that really showed what Orient was capable of. The decade opened with the watch industry caught up in what collectors now call the jewels race. Watchmakers kept adding more and more jewels to their movements, partly because jewels reduce friction at key pivot points, but mostly because a higher jewel count was a marketing weapon. Brands competed to see who could stuff the most rubies into a movement. Orient decided they weren't going to play the game, they were going to end it. In 1964, they released the Grand Prix 100, an automatic watch with a movement containing 100 jewels. For perspective, a typical modern automatic watch has somewhere between 21 and 25. Were all 100 of those jewels mechanically necessary? Absolutely not. Many were decorative rubies placed to hit that staggering number. But the Grand Prix 100 carried more than bragging rights. It also featured a day and date complication, 100 meters of water resistance, the in-cab lock shock protection system, and a triostat regulator for improved accuracy. It was a real watch, not just a publicity stunt. And it was the most expensive Orient of its era, holding that distinction for 5 years. That same year, Orient released its first diver's watch to catch the global scuba diving boom, and it arrived just as Tokyo was hosting the 1964 Summer Olympics. Japan was showcasing its post-war industrial revival to the entire world, and Orient was right in the thick of it. Meanwhile, Orient was developing something less flashy, but arguably more significant for its long-term identity. In 1965, the company introduced its multi-year calendar watch. The concept was clever. A disc printed with years and weekdays was installed on the movement. Using a second crown, you could rotate the disc to place the current year under its corresponding month at the bottom of the dial, and the correct weekday would automatically appear above each date at the top. Remember, this was the mid-1960s. No smartphones, no personal computers. Your wristwatch was the most sophisticated piece of portable technology you carried, and Orient had turned one into a calendar that could tell you what day of the week any date fell on for more than 2 decades into the future. The multi-year calendar became one of Orient's most recognizable designs and stayed in production in various forms for decades. Then, in 1967, Orient accomplished something that had nothing to do with marketing gimmicks and everything to do with pure mechanical engineering. They introduced the Fineness, powered by caliber 3900. The movement measured just 3.9 millimeters thick, making it the thinnest self-winding automatic movement in the world for a watch with both a day and date display. Orient's engineers achieved this by offsetting the wheel train and designing a compact reverser. They used a monocase construction with no separate caseback, eliminating every possible fraction of a millimeter. The Fineness used 35 joules and held that world record for 7 years, until Citizen finally edged past it in 1974 with a movement measuring 3.73 millimeters. A difference of less than 0.2 of a millimeter, and Citizen needed half a decade to close that gap. Orient was even experimenting with wild designs during this period. The 1960s and 70s produced some of the most visually adventurous watches the company ever made. The Ace Chrono Jaguar Focus featured color-shifting dials in an angular cushion case with a faceted crystal cut with 9 faces. Orient was actually among the first companies to adopt that 9-sided cut glass method, which later became common across the industry. The Orient Mexican featured a green dial and a 2-tone case that looked nothing like the conservative dress watches the company was known for. So by the end of the 1960s, Orient had set a world record for movement thinness, built a 100-joule watch, created a unique multi-year calendar complication, was exporting to dozens of countries, and had a lineup spanning dive watches to high-end dress pieces. They were competing with Seiko, competing with Citizen, and winning on specific technical benchmarks. But then the whole watchmaking world changed. On December 25, 1969, Seiko released the Astron, the world's first commercially available quartz wristwatch. Quartz movements were more accurate than any mechanical movement ever built, cheaper to mass produce, and virtually maintenance-free. A quartz watch could keep time to within a few seconds per month. The best mechanical watches were accurate to a few seconds per day. It wasn't even close. Over the following decade, quartz nearly destroyed the Swiss watch industry. Before the crisis, Switzerland produced 95% of all mechanical watches sold worldwide. By the end of the 1970s, quartz had overtaken mechanical watches in total sales volume. About 2/3 of Swiss watchmakers closed their doors permanently. Swiss watch exports dropped by more than 50%. 90,000 industry jobs vanished. Brands that had been operating for generations went bankrupt in the span of a few years. It took a management consultant named Nicholas Hayek and the creation of the Swatch Group to eventually pull the Swiss industry back from the brink. And that recovery didn't really begin until the mid-1980s. The upheaval was so catastrophic, it earned its own name, the Quartz Crisis. Most Japanese watchmakers went all in on quartz and digital technology. It was, after all, their revolution. Seiko had started the revolution. Casio and Citizen ran hard with it, and Orient adapted too. In 1976, they co-developed a watch called the Touchtron with sharp electronics that featured an LED display you could activate just by touching the case. No buttons needed. It was genuinely futuristic for 1976, but here's what separates Orient from almost every other watchmaker on the planet during the quartz era. They never stopped making mechanical watches. While companies all over the world treated mechanical movements as dead technology, Orient kept its mechanical production lines running every single year. The practical reason was their export business. Orient sold watches in over 70 countries, and in many of those markets, particularly across the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and South America, replacement batteries weren't easy to find. A mechanical automatic watch that wound itself on the wrist was simply more practical in those regions than a quartz watch that would stop working the moment its battery died. The movement that kept Orient's mechanical tradition alive through these lean decades was caliber 46. Introduced in 1971, it was built on the architecture of Seiko's caliber 7006, combined with an older proven system called magic level winding. Orient's engineers took a competitor's base movement and rebuilt it into something distinctly their own. The result was a reliable, accurate automatic movement that was beautifully simple to maintain and could be adapted for dozens of different watch configurations without requiring major redesigns. Over its 5 decades of production, the 46 spawned an enormous family of variations. Power reserve indicators, world time complications, day and date displays, 24-hour hands, and AM/PM indicators, all built on the same core platform. The top-tier variants, used in Orient Star Royal and Royal Orient models, were designated 46L, 46M, and 46T, and these added hand winding and second-hand hacking, features that the base movement intentionally left out to keep costs down. In 2012, Orient began developing a new generation called the 46F6, which kept the same barrel, escape wheel, pallet fork, and balance wheel as the original 46, but redesigned the plates and bridges into a modular system that could accommodate different complications without separate tooling for each model. That modular approach cut manufacturing costs and opened the door for the F7 and eventually the Fate that would arrive years later. Masashi Takano, one of Orient's engineers, described this period with a kind of blunt honesty you almost never hear from someone inside a company. He said they just quietly kept making mechanical watches. There's no glamour in that sentence, no corporate branding around preserving heritage. They just did it because the orders kept coming. And, for nearly 20 years, technological progress on Orient's mechanical watches essentially stalled. They were making the same caliber 46 variants year after year. But that quiet persistence turned out to be the most important decision in the company's history. Because in the early 1990s, mechanical watches came roaring back. Swiss luxury brands staged one of the most dramatic comebacks in business history, and consumers around the world decided they wanted the craftsmanship, the heritage, and the mesmerizing sweep of a mechanical seconds hand. The brands that had maintained their mechanical expertise during the Quartz years were perfectly positioned. Orient had never abandoned theirs. They'd never even slowed down. In 1997, Orient resurrected the Orient Star brand as a dedicated line of premium mechanical timepieces. The timing was deliberate. Swiss luxury watches were selling again, and the market for well-made mechanicals at accessible prices was wide open. Orient had the movements, the manufacturing expertise, and the institutional knowledge to fill that gap. In 2003, they opened the Orient Technical Center in Akita Prefecture, a purpose-built facility specifically for assembling luxury watches with higher finishing standards. The following year, they released a new Royal Orient with a completely redesigned movement, caliber 88,700, initially limited to just 100 pieces. Orient had always had a talent for skeleton watches too. Their first skeletonized movement appeared around 1991, and the company kept refining the concept through multiple generations, eventually producing skeleton watches under both the Orient Star and the Royal Orient labels that showed off their movement finishing in ways that invited direct comparison with Swiss competitors at much higher prices. But Orient's biggest cultural impact in the modern era came from something much more accessible than skeleton watches or silicon technology. Sometime in the 2000s, watch collectors discovered a dress watch called the Bambino. It's a simple, elegant, automatic watch with a steeply domed mineral crystal, a sunburst dial, and a price tag that usually sits between $100 and $150. For that money, you get an in-house mechanical movement. That single fact makes the watch world stop and pay attention. Virtually every other brand at that price point uses movements bought from third-party suppliers like Miyota or Seagull. Orient designs and builds their own from the ground up in their own factory. That distinction means Orient controls the entire vertical, the design of the gear train, the specifications of the mainspring, the tolerances of every jewel setting. The quality isn't outsourced. Ask any watch forum for a recommendation on a first mechanical watch, and the Bambino comes up before you even finish typing the question. One review site put it bluntly. They said there hasn't been a more complete mechanical dress watch that can compete with the Bambino for under $300. The watch has gone through 7 versions now, with the most recent ones available in a 38mm case size that collectors had been requesting for years. The same Grassroots loyalty happened with Orient's dive watches, the Mako and the Ray. Both are automatic divers with 200-meter water resistance, rotating bezels, and in-house movements, priced under $150. The name Mako wasn't even Orient's idea. Early versions had a dolphin figure on the bracelet clasp, and someone in the collector community thought it resembled a short-fin Mako shark. The nickname stuck so hard that Orient eventually adopted it as the official model name. Collectors call the Mako and Ray strap monsters because they look good on virtually any band you put them on. NATO straps, leather, rubber, steel. These are watches that get worn every day by people who could afford something more expensive but choose not to, because the Orient does everything they need. While Orient was building that Grassroots reputation in the affordable segment, the Orient Star line was pushing the company's technical ambitions further than they'd ever gone. In 2021, Orient Star introduced the 46 F8 series movement, and this is where the story gets really interesting from an engineering standpoint. The Fate uses a silicon escape wheel developed in-house by Seiko Epson, Orient's parent company at the time. Silicon weighs roughly 1/3 of what traditional metal does, so the mainspring's energy gets transmitted more efficiently through the gear train. The result is a 70-hour power reserve. Take the watch off Friday evening, put it back on Monday morning, and it's still running. Accuracy improved to +15, -5 seconds per day. Seiko Epson manufactured the silicon components using a precision technology called MEMS, adapted from their printhead division, achieving cutting accuracy of 1/1000th of a millimeter. 2 engineers behind the project, Eiichi Nagasaka and Takeo Funakawa, published their findings in a journal called Micromechatronics. And here's the detail that really drives home how underappreciated Orient has been. Orient Star is, to this day, the only Japanese watch brand using silicon escape wheel technology in production watches. Seiko itself hasn't adopted it in its own branded models yet. The smaller, quieter sibling got there first. So you have a company with over a century of heritage counting Yoshida's original shop, 75 years under the Orient name, in-house movements, at every price tier, a world record for movement thinness, a unique multi-year calendar complication, silicon technology that its bigger Japanese rivals haven't matched, and a devoted collector base that actually wears these watches daily. All of that, and Orient still gets left out of most conversations about great watchmakers. Marketing explains part of it. Orient never spent the way Seiko and Citizen did. Seiko was the official timekeeper of the Olympics. Citizen put its name on stadiums and sponsored athletic teams. Orient just made watches and trusted the product to speak for itself. In Japan and in export markets where word of mouth carried weight, that approach worked. In North America and Europe, where brand awareness drives purchasing decisions and most shoppers can't tell one mechanical movement from another, Orient stayed invisible. Corporate absorption explains the rest. In 2001, Seiko Epson purchased a 52% majority stake in Orient. By 2009, Orient was a wholly owned subsidiary. In April 2017, Seiko Epson fully absorbed Orient Watch Company's business operations. The corporate entity went dormant. Then, on February 1st, 2026, Seiko Epson formally dissolved Orient Watch Company through an absorption-type merger. The company that factory workers built from rubble and ambition in 1950 ceased to exist as a legal entity. The brand lives on. Seiko Epson still produces and sells watches under the Orient and Orient Star names. Akita Epson Corporation handles manufacturing. Epson Sales Japan handles distribution. New models keep coming. In 2026, Orient Star celebrated its 75th anniversary with limited edition skeleton watches featuring a meteorite-inspired crystalline finish, and the company extended its warranty period to 3 years across both the Orient and Orient Star lines. But a brand run as a product division inside a technology company is a different creature than an independent watchmaker with its own board, its own engineering team, and its own sense of purpose. When Orient was independent, the people making decisions about what to build next were watchmakers. They knew the history. They understood why caliber 46 mattered, why the fineness was worth building, why a 100-jewel movement was more than a marketing stunt. Orient's future is now decided by Seiko Epson, a corporation whose annual revenue comes overwhelmingly from printers, projectors, and industrial robots. Watches are a fraction of the business. The people in the boardroom aren't thinking about escapement geometry or silicon escape wheels. They're thinking about quarterly earnings across a conglomerate with dozens of product categories. When Seiko Epson announced in 2024 that some Orient models would shift production to a factory in Thailand, collectors worried about what it meant for the Made in Japan identity that had always been central to Orient's appeal. Others pointed out that Epson's semiconductor fabrication capabilities, the same technology that made the silicon escape wheel possible, represent a kind of resource that no independent watchmaker at Orient's price level could ever access. The trade-off is real. Orient gained tools and lost a voice. What stays, regardless of who signs the corporate filings, is the record. Orient built the world's thinnest automatic day-date movement in 1967 and held the title for 7 years. They produced a 100-jewel wristwatch in 1964 that nobody else could match. They never stopped making mechanical movements during the 2 decades when the rest of the industry had written them off. They introduced the first multi-year calendar watch in 1965. They pioneered silicon escape wheel technology in Japanese watchmaking before even Seiko adopted it. And they put in-house automatic movements into watches that cost less than a decent pair of sneakers. For 75 years, Orient did all of that while barely anyone outside the watch community was paying attention. No Super Bowl ads, no Olympic sponsorships, no celebrity endorsements, just watches built by people who cared about the craft, sold at prices that made mechanical watchmaking accessible to anyone who wanted in. The company that factory workers rebuilt from wartime rubble. The company that held a world record with a movement thinner than a stack of 4 credit cards. The company that never stopped believing in gears and springs when the rest of the world moved to batteries and circuits. Orient Watch Company is gone now, absorbed into the corporate structure of a conglomerate. But the next time someone asks you to name Japan's great watchmakers, the correct answer has always been 3, not 2. Seiko, Citizen, and Orient. The giant that history forgot, and the one that earned far more than it ever received. If this story was new to you, hit subscribe and leave a comment telling us which overlooked watch brand you think deserves its own video. A like helps more people discover this one.